The day my daughter-in-law arrived uninvited at my villa in the Alps, I knew the past had finally found my address. I had chosen this place for its silence. Snow folded over the mountains like a white secret, and the pine trees stood tall enough to guard it. After my husband Daniel died 2 years ago, I sold the city house, withdrew from neighbors who whispered more than they comforted, and disappeared into this luxury villa tucked above a quiet alpine village. No one knew the exact location, at least, that's what I believed. So when the doorbell rang that afternoon and I opened it to find Clara, my son's wife, standing there with 2 large suitcases and a forced smile, my hands went cold. "We heard you bought a luxury villa in the Alps. We came to live with you and make peace," she said, pushing her luggage past me before I answered. Behind her stood my son, Adrian, avoiding my eyes. Make peace. The words echoed strangely in the wooden hallway. Peace had not been something they sought when Daniel's will was read. They had accused me of hiding assets, of manipulating him in his final months. Adrian had believed her. That betrayal had hurt more than widowhood. I stepped aside and let them in. I didn't ask how they found the address. I didn't mention that I had changed my number twice. I simply closed the door. But when they walked into the main hall, they stopped cold. The chandelier above cast a soft golden glow over the marble floor. The fireplace was lit. And on the far wall, framed in dark oak, hung the original architectural blueprint of the villa, signed by Daniel. Clara's breath caught. Adrian stared at the signature. They hadn't known this house existed before his death. Neither had I. They stood frozen at the sight of Daniel's name inked boldly across the blueprint, dated 12 years ago, long before his illness, long before our arguments, long before Clara entered our lives. This was Dad's? Adrian finally asked, his voice thinner than I remembered. Yes, I replied calmly. He built it. The truth was heavier than the marble beneath our feet. Daniel had purchased the land in secret during a business trip. At the time, our marriage had been strained. He'd told me he needed a place to breathe. I thought it was a metaphor. It wasn't. After his sudden diagnosis, he brought me here once. Just once. The villa was unfinished then, raw beams, cold stone, echoing rooms. He had stood in this very hall and said, "If anything happens to me, promise you'll complete it." I had promised, not understanding why his voice trembled. Clara stepped closer to the blueprint, tracing the signature without touching it. Why didn't anyone know? Because Daniel had insisted on privacy. Because he had transferred the deed into a holding company months before his death. Because the final paperwork was completed only days before he passed away. Because he had been afraid. Afraid of business partners. Afraid of disputes. Afraid, perhaps, of his own son's impatience. I watched Adrian's reflection in the glass frame. Confusion flickered there, followed by something sharper, calculation. That was when I noticed Clara glance toward the staircase. She wasn't looking at the bedrooms. She was looking at the locked door at the end of the corridor, the only room I had never opened since Daniel's funeral. And for the first time since they arrived, I wondered if they had truly come for peace, or for something they believed was hidden behind that door. I had kept that door locked not out of fear, but out of respect for a promise I didn't fully understand. Clara's eyes lingered on it too long to be accidental. Adrian followed her gaze, then quickly looked away when he realized I was watching. That silent exchange told me more than their rehearsed apology ever could. "You must be tired from the journey," I said evenly. "Your room is upstairs. The West Wing." There was only one guest suite prepared. I had never expected more than one visitor at a time. The fact that they had brought enough luggage for months unsettled me. That evening, over dinner, they asked careful questions disguised as casual conversation. How long had I been here? Who handled the villa's maintenance? Did I plan to sell it eventually? Each question circled the same invisible center. After they retired, I remained in the main hall, staring at the locked door. Daniel had given me the small brass key in the hospital, pressing it into my palm when the machines began to outnumber his words. "Not until you're ready," he had whispered. Ready for what? Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Soft. Intentional. I didn't move from my chair. The handle of the locked door turned gently. Once. Twice. Then stopped. A faint metallic sound followed, the scrape of something thin against the lock. I stood silently and stepped into the hallway. Clara froze, a hairpin in her hand. Adrian stood a few feet behind her, pale and wide-eyed. "I was just curious," she said too quickly. "Curiosity," I replied, "is rarely innocent at midnight." Adrian swallowed. "Mom. Dad mentioned something about documents. Investments. He said this place was important." Important. That was the word Daniel had used. Not valuable. Not profitable. Important. I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the brass key. I had not been ready before. But now I understood that whatever was behind that door was the reason they had come. And if I didn't open it soon, they would. Morning arrived wrapped in thin mountain fog, and with it, clarity. I made coffee slowly, deliberately, while Adrian and Clara sat in uneasy silence at the table. I placed the brass key between us. "You came for something," I said. "Let's stop pretending." Adrian exhaled first. "Dad told me, months before he died, that he'd secured our future. He said if anything happened, there would be proof. He told me to trust you, but Clara found messages about this place. We thought you were hiding money. So that was it." Suspicion fed by fragments. Daniel had sensed his illness earlier than he admitted. He had discovered irregularities within his own company, silent siphoning by a senior partner. The villa wasn't an escape. It was leverage. Hidden inside that locked room, he had stored original contracts, encrypted drives, and signed statements exposing the fraud. He hadn't wanted to trigger a scandal before gathering complete evidence. When he died unexpectedly, only I knew the full story. I finished the villa because I needed time, to sort the documents, to consult lawyers quietly, to protect Adrian from legal fallout. I stood and walked to the locked door. The key turned smoothly. Inside, the room was not a vault of gold, but a study. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A safe rested beneath the window. On the desk lay Daniel's leather journal. I handed it to Adrian. "Read." As he turned the pages, the truth unfolded in Daniel's handwriting: names, dates, confessions of fear, and one final entry: "Protect our son. Trust her judgment." Clara's face drained of color. There was no hidden fortune, only evidence that would soon expose corruption and restore what had been quietly stolen. "I was never hiding wealth," I said softly. "I was protecting his legacy. And you." Adrian closed the journal, tears he rarely allowed slipping free. Clara lowered her gaze, shame replacing ambition. They had come expecting treasure. They found truth instead. And in that quiet alpine morning, beneath snow-covered peaks Daniel once called our sanctuary, peace finally felt possible.